With both the economy and the Labour Party's poll ratings going south, not north, it seems the government has struck on a new strategy to try and find some votes. My name's Tom Harwood and this is GB News Originals. Yes, it's finally happened. Just a year into this new government and they are changing the way that voting occurs in the United Kingdom. The first franchise expansion in more than 50 years. What will happen? Well, 16 and 17-year-olds will be given the vote, lowering that franchise to bring in many more voters. But why is the government doing this and what could the implications be, both with regard to elections and society in general? Well, it's worth remembering that this was in the Labour Party manifesto. It wasn't there front and centre, but it was in that manifesto. Now, I can tell you that there was some disagreement at the top of the Labour Party as to whether or not this should be pursued. Traditionally, 16 and 17-year-olds have more extreme politics, for want of a better word. There's more people who support parties like the Green Party on the left, or indeed the Reform Party on the right. And yet polling currently shows that the Labour Party amongst 16 and 17-year-olds across the country holds a lead with this group, unlike the country at large. It's not a huge lead, but it's a lead nonetheless. Adding 16 and 17-year-olds into any electoral mix on the margins benefits the Labour Party more than any other party. Perhaps it's not surprising that the moment when the Labour Party is in second, or at least by one poll in third place in the national polling picture, they need to find some more votes somewhere. That's the critical view of things, but of course the Labour Party has been arguing that they need to boost youth participation in politics. The polling, however, does not seem to back that idea up. Almost half of 16 and 17-year-olds, according to a recent poll out this week, do not want the vote. And the number who say they would definitely vote if a general election were held tomorrow is even lower. So why then is this expansion of the franchise, this lowering of the voting age, becoming such a priority for a government that is battling so many fires on so many fronts? Let's not forget that this is the week that inflation unexpectedly ticked upwards, that employment continues to fall downwards, that the size of GDP went backwards in the last month that we have data for, rather than forwards. On every economic metric, this government seems to be struggling. Perhaps that's why then they seem to be focusing on a decidedly non-economic constitutional issue. Could this be a large distraction? But more than that, could this also be a turning of the tide against what has been happening with regard to the rights of 16 and 17-year-olds in recent years? Of course, it's often spoken about that the school leaving age is 16, but that's not really true, and it hasn't really been true since the year 2008. The Education and Skills Act of that year effectively raised the school leaving age to 18. It created a legal duty for 16 and 17-year-olds to participate in appropriate full-time education until they were 18. Now that's schooling or apprenticeships. So that raises the question, given that the government is now saying that the voting age should be 16, should the school leaving age not return to 16 too? Will the new government be repealing that 2008 legislation? But there's more than that. It used to be said that at 16-year-olds you could get married at the age of 16. But the Marriage and Civil Partnerships Act 2022 raised the age at which anyone can legally marry from 16 to 18. The argument in favour of this act at the time was to stop child exploitation. But now that 16 and 17-year-olds will be able to vote for a new government, well, why wouldn't they be able to vote to get married themselves? Will the new government be repealing that raised level of marriage age?
Hello, I'm Bev Turner. Now, it can feel like the money in our bank accounts at the moment does not keep up with the cost of living, and maybe there's a solution. I'm here today with the CEO of TallyMoney, Cameron Parry. Cameron, what is TallyMoney?
Well, Bev, with TallyMoney, you get a current account and a debit card, but instead of pounds, you use milligrams of gold as your everyday money.
So why gold?
Gold traditionally is a great store of value. It has, on average, gone up at over 11% per annum for the last 25 years against the pound. It's tripled in value in the last decade. And in the last 2 years alone, it's increased by 50% against the pound. Banks' savings products just can't compete with that level of growth.
But this isn't just about gold. This is about a currency that you guys have created at TallyMoney. Explain it to me as though I'm an idiot.
So, look, people need to be able to hold their earnings and build their savings in a money that retains its value and remains in their legal control and remains theirs to access, away from government control.
Great. You had me at not exposed to government control.
You should feel safe and happy with your money. You should have peace of mind. The more money you see in your bank balance, and that's the type of thing we're trying to deliver, and give people choice in the type of money they get to use every day.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Cameron. Thank you.
But there's more. It's often spoken about that the age of 16 and 17-year-olds, they can join the army. But the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child places a duty on the signatories, including the United Kingdom, to protect children in armed conflict, forbidding child soldiers and dictating no person under the age of 18 may participate in any hostilities. So the question becomes, given that 16-year-olds will be voting for government, will they also be fighting at war? Will the government be withdrawing from the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child? Elsewhere, the Licensing Act 2003 made it an offence to sell or allow alcohol sales to people under the age of 18 at licensed premises. Of course, people, once they're over the age of 18, are allowed to go out and buy alcohol or go to clubs that serve alcohol. But under the age of 18, they are not. They're forbidden by law. It's a legitimate question now to ask, will the government be repealing that legislation and lowering the drinking age to 16? Elsewhere, the Gambling Act 2005, it made it an offence to invite young people to gamble and sets the minimum age for gambling at 18. Even the National Lottery, yes, the National Lottery Act, as amended in 2021, raised the minimum age to participate in the National Lottery to 18 as well. Is it really sustainable to say that 16-year-olds will be able to vote for a new government, but not buy a lottery ticket? Will the government be repealing that particular piece of legislation? There are so many different issues here that talk about the responsibilities and the rights of people once they reach the age of 16. Generally, a country does well to have a consistent balance of rights and responsibilities. Where do those rights fall? Where does that balance lie? Are people given rights without responsibilities, or responsibilities without rights? Up until recently, it had been the case that at the age of 18, you gained rights and you gained responsibilities. It became known as the age of majority, at least in England and Wales. Now, when you are 18, when you're given rights to buy alcohol, to go out drinking, to go out and fight for your country, to buy a lottery ticket, to play violent video games, well, why not then, too, that be the age at which you're given the right to vote? But if we start to split rights from responsibilities, what sort of entitlement culture does that create? And there's a further element to this too. The Online Safety Act in 2023 was passed, and that created a legal duty for online platforms to prevent anyone under the age of 18 from accessing harmful content. That harmful content includes pornography, violent material, or extremist content online. Yes, restrictions on speech placed on people under the age of 18. The Online Safety Act forcing companies to engage in expensive age checking to make sure that people can't access content freely if they're under the age of 18. But how then can you participate freely in a democracy if you're prevented from accessing information online because you are not at that age of 18, but you can still vote for your government? How does that work? Clearly, legislation after legislation, Act of Parliament after Act of Parliament in recent years has raised the age at which people can access information, can buy items, can participate in civil society, has been raised to 18. And yet now we have a government that is lowering the voting age to 16. How do these two things make any sense at all? Where is the consistency? Is a 16-year-old an adult or a child or something in between? And why is that balance of rights and responsibilities going in two completely different directions? These are some serious questions that the government has as yet failed to answer. And particularly that issue on the Online Safety Act, the issue of preventing people under the age of 18 accessing various forums online and yet being able to vote for their government. Is that a sustainable position for the government to find itself in? Now, it could be argued that in recent decades, we've extended childhood far too long. People marry later than they used to. People settle down later than they used to. People buy houses far later than they used to. It could be argued this is part of the reason why we've got a declining birth rate in the United Kingdom, that we've delayed the reality of adulthood for so many people. By the time that my grandparents were my age, they'd had many, many children. I don't have any. And I wonder if that is actually one of the big questions that we need to face as a society. At what point do we drag out the age of childhood? And at what point do we say that people actually can enter adulthood? It seems that it's slid recently in recent decades. And yet, will the action of giving the vote, of lowering that voting age by 2 years, do anything to arrest that sort of societal conundrum that we found ourselves in? It does not seem likely. We haven't seen trends differ in places like Scotland, where for Scottish parliamentary elections, 16-year-olds have been able to vote for some years now. This does seem to be a profound constitutional change, one that seems to be fairly ill thought through when comparing to all the other pieces of legislation that have affected people at the age of 16 and 17. The question has to be asked, is this really a principled issue of constitutional participation? Or is this a grubby grab for extra votes come the next general election from a party that is trailing in the national opinion polls? Well, I'll let you have that fight out in the comments section below. Do remember to click that subscribe button to the GBNews YouTube channel to stay up to date with all the latest displacement activity that the government seems to be engaging in, rather than getting the economy back on track.